like to call the City of Pompano Beach Zoning Board of Appeals meeting of Thursday, January 18th, 2024 to order. Martha, would you please call the roll?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Charlotte Burry.
Here.
Penny Cutt.
Here.
Nicole Kopak.
Here.
Richard Daly.
Present.
Linda Thomas.
Here.
And Dan Yaffe.
Here. Thank you. We do have a quorum. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the December 14th meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. Motion is made and seconded. All those, any additions, corrections, deletions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I want to take a few minutes and tell you why we're all here today. Some of you, I'm kind of guessing, I know one party is coming here with counsel. We're the Zoning Board of Appeals. We're here to listen to your appeal because you're looking for some sort of relief, whether it be a variance, special exception, temporary permit, whatever. There's 6 of us here, myself, 3 folks to my left, 2 to my right. We're residents of the city. We serve with no compensation. We're here to listen to your appeal. The gentleman to my far right is Scott Reale, who represents Development Services. James Saunders, my far left, is the Assistant City Attorney, and Martha Lawson, who runs everything. So with that, the process is I'm going to call you first. In a minute or two, I'm going to ask everybody who's going to speak, thinks they're going to speak or might speak, to stand and we'll swear you in, because I only like to do it one time. You're going to be under oath. That means you got to tell the truth. When I call your case, you're going to come up to that podium. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, giving me your name, spell your last name, address, and let me know verbally if you've been sworn in. Again, this is a quasi-judicial hearing. Then we're going to listen to Mr. Reale telling us why we're here from the city's perspective. You will then have an opportunity to present your case, call witnesses, bring evidence forward, whatever you'd like to do. My job, my most important job, is to be sure that you, as the applicant, have an opportunity to be fully and fairly heard. So you're going to have time to do that. This is a public hearing, so at some point I will ask if anyone in the audience wishes to speak first in support and then secondly in opposition. So we'll hear from the public. After all that, and by the way, you can cross anybody who speaks. Cross-examine in case you're not an attorney out here. You'll have an opportunity to close in comments. Again, my job is to be sure everything works smoothly. If you have a question or something about the process or procedure, stop and ask. Can't make your case for you, but I can be sure that you're heard properly. Okay? With that in mind, I'd like everybody who's going to speak to please stand up and raise your right hand.
Okay, do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Do.
Thank you. You may be seated. First item tonight in the public hearing is item number 1, LN 514, a special exception request from Kaja Properties, Inc. This is P&Z 23-17-00007. Mr. Reale, I'm sorry, folks, you coming up?
Good evening. My name is Jana Loda. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Holland & Knight. The spelling of my last name is L-H-O-T-A, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
Give me just a moment. I'm going to pull up our presentation.
Yep, I'm going to.
Okay, we're going to hear from Mr. Reale first.
Absolutely.
We can wait so you're ready.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the board and the audience. For the record, my name is Scott Reale, Principal Planner with Development Services in the City of Pompano Beach. In the case of P&Z number 23-17000007, the applicant is requesting special exception approval as required by Section 155, 4219, H1, sorry, I need my glasses, of the Pompano Beach Zoning Code in order to utilize the subject property, which is zoned B3, for a car wash. The property is located on the west side of North Federal Highway between Sample Road and Northeast 39th Street. The parcel is considered a through lot with Northeast 18th Terrace abutting the west lot line. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing buildings on the subject property and redevelop this site with a drive-through car wash facility containing 4,900 square feet of enclosed building area, 11 vacuum stations, and associated parking and landscaping. Car washes require special exception approval in the B3 zoning district. A pre-application meeting, which was P&Z number 23-12000036, was held on August 8th, 2023, to discuss the conceptual site plan for the proposed car wash. The special exception application was first heard by the ZBA on September 21st, 2023, where the board voted to deny the car wash use. Two board members voted in opposition of the use. 4 board members voted in support of the requested use. However, an associated variance application, which was P&Z 23-11000018, was granted in order to allow the drive-through service to be located less than 100 feet from a residential zoning district. And then on October 19th of 2023, the board granted a rehearing request for the special exception after the applicant presented new evidence that was not readily available at the September 21st meeting, including FDOT meeting summary, additional queuing study, a traffic impact statement, and additionally, and perhaps most importantly, the conceptual site plan has been modified, which was previously was modified to provide additional means of egress along Northeast 18th Terrace on the west side, which is the rear of the property, whereas previously that was intended to be used only for emergency fire access. Staff believes the secondary means of egress may help to reduce congestion along North Federal Highway, which was one of the main concerns of the board at the initial public hearing. The property immediately to the south is a Wawa convenience store and gas station. The property to the north is a tire and auto repair business. And the property north of that was recently approved by the ZBA for automobile parts sales with installation for wrapping vehicles with vinyl in an enclosed facility. Thus, it does not seem out of character for an automotive-related use to operate at this site. If the special exception is approved, the property will require site plan and building design review. There are 13 special exception review standards. The applicant has addressed each of these, and should the board determine that the applicant has provided competent, substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy the 13 special exception review standards, staff requests the board include the following conditions as part of the order. 1, obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, including site plan, building design, and zoning use certificate, and a business tax receipt for the use. 2, close out any and all open building permits. 3, substantial compliance with the updated conceptual site plan submitted with this application. And the 4th and final recommended staff condition, no operation associated with the use shall occur in a manner that impedes the normal free flow of vehicular or pedestrian traffic on adjacent rights-of-way, that being North Federal Highway and Northeast 18th Terrace. And that concludes staff's report. I'm available for any questions, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Reale. Counselor?
Good evening. Once again, Jana Loda. I am counsel for the applicant. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Holland & Knight with offices at 515 East Las Olas, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I also have 2 other members of our team with me here tonight to the extent I can't answer any of your questions. We have Ms. Paula West, who is our planner with Plan West, as well as the Vice President of Development for National Express Wash, Daryl Peterson. Briefly, I'm going to take you through a presentation that will hopefully show you how we feel that we have now satisfied the requirements for the granting of a special exception. I'll try not to repeat any of the information that you gave staff, since I know you have several other items on your agenda tonight. Again, we're before you tonight seeking the redevelopment of the property located at 3685 North Federal Highway for a state-of-the-art automatic car wash use. As staff indicated, the property is located west of Federal Highway, east of Northeast 18th Terrace, and just north of Sample Road. It's important to note that while the property located east of Northeast 18th Terrace is zoned residential, the uses along that corridor on the west side of the road are predominantly commercial. Indeed, the property that's located directly west of Northeast 18th Terrace is occupied by the Pompano Beach Sail and Power Squadron. As staff indicated, this is the second time that this application has been before you. Back in September, you heard two applications, one for the variance to allow the drive-through service facility within 100 feet of residential. That use was unanimously approved by this board. The second application was our request for a special exception, which was denied 4-2. The main issues that were raised during the deliberation of this board as to that application largely resulted to the particular design of the site plan at that time. All access to the site was via Federal Highway and via two full-service access drives. We had a full-service ingress and egress at the north end of the property and then another one at the south end of the property when you immediately left the car wash tunnel. There was some concern with respect to the amount of queuing, particularly at that south exit, and the fact that we didn't have a secondary egress from the site onto Northeast 18th Terrace. Following the September 21st hearing, we finally received our pre-app approval letter from the FDOT following our pre-app meeting in August, which actually took place before the September meeting. And in that letter, the FDOT eliminated any prospective access on the south end of our site, leaving us with just the singular full access at the north end of our site, thereby addressing one of the big concerns that was raised by this board in September. With that, we immediately filed a motion for rehearing, which was considered by the board in October, and a motion was approved unanimously by this board for this rehearing. So we are again before you tonight requesting approval of the special exception. Since I know there may be individuals who either were or were not here in September when we did the full presentation, I'm going to just provide a quick overview of who is National Express Wash, exactly what we are proposing in the operation of the site, which will be important as you consider the special exception criteria, and then provide a summary of how we feel this application satisfies each of the criteria that guides your decision tonight. All right, just now a little bit about who is a National Express Wash, who operates under the name L Car Wash. They are probably the largest provider of this type of service in Southeast Florida. You can see here their geographic maps that show all of their existing locations. They have over 30 in service now in Southeast Florida, and all those pink dots that you see, there are more that are in development and construction as we speak. To the left is Miami-Dade and Broward counties. The next image in the center is Palm Beach, and then moving to your left, they go as far north as Brevard and Orlando. One thing about my client is that they are very sensitive to community aesthetics. You'll see in a moment when I provide the presentation with our renderings of the site that they have adapted the site specific to the city of Pompano Beach and the concerns that were raised by staff. Here are some images of our existing facilities. The one to the left is one of our North Miami Beach facilities, and then to the right is actually Palm Beach Gardens. And you can see the subtle changes to, again, adapt to the community standards. The next thing is I just want to kind of walk through, because again, this is going to talk a little bit about the operations of our client, specifically as to the site and throughout their network. Comparing it to what oftentimes are kind of misconceptions or people's understanding of a car wash and what actually is going to be happening here. The first thing is that this is not a 24-hour use. Many car washes, especially those attendant to a gas station, operate 24 hours. This is predominantly a daytime use with hours from 7 to about 9 p.m. at night. It is a very sustainable operation. When I say that, I mean that they use only biodegradable and environmentally friendly products, they actually recycle water. They will recycle water from a car wash and then use it for like the undercarriage of a car wash later on in the day. They use substantially less water than other car wash uses. For example, an at-home car wash uses anywhere to 80 to 140 gallons, where this car wash uses on average 45 gallons per car wash. The other thing that's different is at-home car washes, you're either washing them in your driveway or maybe in your grass if you're trying to not make sure the water goes back into the ground. In both of those cases, that is running into the city's stormwater management, the stormwater drainage facilities, and ultimately into possibly the canals and lakes that serve the city. Our system has a oil water separator. All of the water is treated before it is released into the city's sewer system. So again, we're not impacting anything with respect to the stormwater system. There's no music or loudspeakers. Even the kiosks that we have for individuals to pay for a wash, there's no speakers associated with them. One thing you're going to see in a minute is how we mitigate noise. Unlike your typical car wash or many other self-service car washes or even car washes that you have at gas stations that have individual vacuums that you can use, we have a single producer for the entire site. The producer is the actual engine that makes the noise. At the actual parking stations that you'll see in a minute, all you have is a hose with air coming through it. And our producers are always enclosed in concrete structures, and for this particular facility, it's actually enclosed in the tower element of our building, so totally within the concrete building that we're proposing to build. The site will comply with all the photometric standard requirements. Again, this is predominantly a daytime use. You're going to find that this is also not typical of other car washes in that it is very labor light. Our employees do not touch the car. There's probably about 3 to 4 employees that are on site at any one time. One is charged with basically maintaining the site, emptying trash bins, that type of thing, making sure the product is there for the customers. The other employees typically at the kiosk to assist with any questions regarding car washes or just making sure that people are seamlessly processing through that element. And then the third employee is typically there to guide the car into the automatic drag line that forms the tunnel. The operation is also, from a security standpoint, it's cashless. Most of our individuals that use our car wash are members. They pay for monthly membership, and we have either an RFID or a LPR type system that will read their vehicle, so they just then immediately proceed into the car wash tunnel. There are also, National Express Wash is also a good community partner. They always strive to get engaged in the communities in which they're located. You can see here some of their key partnerships. They do many promotions for first responders and other service personnel, and also do a lot of give back promotions as well for local charities. All right, I'll turn now back to the property. This is a little bit close-up aerial that you see on the left side of the screen. The property is, again, comprised of 2 different buildings, and I have a photograph of the building that fronts on Federal Highway is in the upper corner. It is an approximately 2,500 square foot restaurant. There is then another building in the rear. It is a 2-story, about 12,600 square foot building, office building. With our redevelopment, obviously, these uses will be torn down in lieu of the new automatic car wash. All right, now here is the updated and revised site plan. Sure I didn't go too far. Sorry, I did. The new and revised site plan. As I mentioned earlier, the site plan that was initially considered by this board in September had 2 full access points onto Federal and no open access onto Northeast 18th Terrace. With the FDOT letter, the site plan has been revised to eliminate that south access. We now just have the singular access coming in off Federal at the north end of our site. And we also now have the egress onto Northeast 18th Terrace, which was suggested by this board at the September meeting. We'll be guiding individuals leaving the car wash tunnel that want to just exit the site and not use the vacuums through signage, as well as you can see pavement markings as well to direct them. This is another item just to highlight, and this was a question, and so we wanted to make sure that we came here with this exhibit. This shows the amount of stacking on the site for cars coming in and cars leaving. So cars that are coming into the site are denoted in red. As you can see, we have a significant amount of queuing on the site for cars coming into the site. I'm looking here to see if I can't quick get you the number. And again, in green are the cars leaving the site. With the elimination of the south access onto Federal Highway, we more than doubled the amount of queuing for cars leaving the site via Federal Highway. And then, of course, I think we have up to 7 cars that can easily queue that are, if they choose to leave via Northeast 18th Avenue. I want to highlight that as part of the application materials, we did provide a queuing study. I have a copy as well for the record if needed, that compared other car wash sites of similar configuration at AM and PM peak hours, and which shows that this site has more than adequate queuing to provide for the use. The other item I wanted to talk, because I know this is something that was discussed at the September meeting, and that is our traffic analysis. This is an excerpt from the traffic statement that basically compares the existing vested uses, what the traffic is associated with the existing vested uses as compared to the new proposed automatic car wash use. And as you can see with the red numbers at the bottom, almost across the board, it is considered a reduction in trips associated with the site. I thought that was important to highlight because I know there was some concern that this is going to be a very busy site, and I just wanted to help try to put some things into perspective there. And just by way of example, I'm going to distill out a few pieces of information from this. During our AM peak hour, and this is over the span of an hour, we are anticipating a total, just want to make sure I get to the right one here. We're anticipating a total of 16 cars coming into the site, 16 cars coming in and then leaving. With the distribution of having the 2 egress points with Northeast 18th and Federal Highway, over the course of an hour in the AM, we're talking 11 cars coming in and leaving via Federal and 5 via 18th. During the PM peak hour, over the course of an hour, we're looking at 25 with 18 cars leaving onto Federal and then 6 onto Northeast 18th. And again, this is over the span of an hour. Now I'll just turn, this is a kind of a nice rendered site plan, just to again walk you through a little bit quickly of the operations of the site. The first thing is of course our access into the site is via Federal Highway, and people entering the site will be immediately directed via signage as well. That will be directional signage in the site as well as the pavement markings to use the interior or left lane for accessing the car wash. Again, the outside northern lane will be marked for egress onto Northeast 18th Avenue. Individuals will then enter one of the 3 kiosks. Our intent is to have one of the kiosks for members only, so it's easy for those individuals just to get right through. And then once they're done there, they will move forward into the car wash tunnel. Now this is the image I want to start to talk a little bit about what we're doing here that's different than pretty much any other site we have in South Florida. Here we are actually providing an architectural element of enclosing the entrance and the exit to the tunnel. So as you can see here, as the cars pull up, we actually have a solid wall that faces south to hide that overhead door. It also wraps around and faces west. So we literally have an appendage that comes out of our building that will hide that overhead door to the surrounding properties. As you go through the tunnel, we have a similar feature on the Federal Highway side. Here it's actually enclosed with a roof, so when cars exit, they then will turn left out of that enclosure and either into the interior of the site to use the vacuums or to proceed and exit the site either via Northeast 18th or Federal Highway. That tower feature that you see in the front, that is where the producers for the vacuum, the producer, that single producer that operates all the vacuums, the motor will actually be inside the building at that location. The other nice thing about this particular design is the only other real sound that's associated with the car wash is the blowers that are on the inside of the tunnel, which are triggered when a car reaches that point. Aside from the silencing mufflers that we use on that equipment, This enclosure provides another barrier in terms of muffling and mitigating any noise, which is why we feel very confident that we will be able to satisfy the city's noise ordinance with respect to the operation of this facility. One more thing I'll point out before I move on. If you're familiar with automatic car washes, you know that you've probably seen they have large circular vacuums that are beside each of their parking spaces. What this client does to help hide that is they use an architectural tubular canopy that provides a measure of shade, but does a very good job of hiding, so you don't really know that there's vacuum facilities there, or I should say the vacuum hose is there. You'll get a little bit closer up perspective as I move to some of the other renderings. Here is the landscape plan, and I apologize, it's kind of flipped. Here, Federal Highway is on the right, where in the other image it was on the left. My understanding is we are meeting or exceeding the landscape plan for the city of Pompano Beach. One of the key things that we're doing is we're extending the sidewalk on Northeast 18th, where none presently exists now. We're putting up a wall, and as you can see, we are landscaping in that swale area as well to add greenery. We have a rendering that'll show you what it'll look like. And here, I'll turn to the renderings real quick. So here's a rendering from Federal Highway. This is looking west into the site. Here I'm a little bit further north. This is a view kind of across the site to the southwest. This is a view of that dual drive lane coming in. To the left is the exit lane to Northeast 18th Terrace, forgive me, and of the interior lane that will take you to the car wash kiosks and into the tunnel. This is, and here you can start to see that tubular canopy that I was talking before that hides, does a very good job of hiding the vacuum hoses. This is a view kind of looking into the site to the southeast, and you see the 3 kiosks that will be stationed there. And then here's a view from Northeast 18th Terrace. Here you see the wall, you see the plantings along Northeast 18th Terrace that's proposed as part of the site plan. You can also see here that enclosure that we have for the entrance to the tunnel, because there's effectively a wall. You're not looking into the tunnel if you're on 18th Avenue. And again, that's a nice feature. That is something that we don't have in any of our other car washes here in Southeast Florida. Quickly go through this. This is the sound and site operations. I already talked about the producer, so I won't repeat that. Again, customers pretty much stay in their vehicle the whole time until they get to the vacuum stations when they get out and they vacuum the facilities themselves. There'll be no detailing, there'll be no temporary tents, there's nothing of that nature. Our operation is exactly as I'm telling it to you here. Again, very labor light with the minimal amount of employees to serve the services that I explained to you earlier. Hours of operation, again, are daytime, predominantly 7 to 9 p.m. Again, I highlighted the landscape plan where we meet or exceed the code. The building's been designed in such a way to hide the overhead doors, which I think is very important. A lot of different architectural features that have been built in that you can see here in the list here. Now I'm going to quickly go through the criteria for granting a special exception, and then I'll conclude, and I appreciate you all being so patient. The first criteria basically is that the application is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the city's land development regulations. In the narrative included as part of the application, and I'm happy to go through them, but I won't unless you need me to. Ms. West cited a number of goals, policies, and objectives in the comprehensive plan that this application satisfies. I highlight only the fact of how sustainable of a use this is in terms of water conservation and others with respect to that. The application does comply in all respects with the LDRs. The only thing we didn't comply with was the drive-through element and its proximity to residential, but again, that variance was granted by this board in September. The next criteria relates to whether or not the proposed use overburdens available capacity of existing public facilities and services. Again, we provided you information from the traffic impact statement that the redevelopment of the property with this use, when compared against what's vested on the property, is actually a reduction in trips. We also provided information regarding the queuing study that shows that this site will operate at peak hours with more queuing as compared to many of the other sites operated by El Car Wash. We also highlighted the water conservation element, that this application actually helps reduce water consumption and the demands on the city's potable water facilities through the equipment and the method of operation, coupled with our recycling of water for future washes. We also showed you the benefits of our operation, which filters the wastewater through an oil water separator before any discharge into the sanitary sewer system, as compared to at-home car washes, which often drain into the city's stormwater management facilities. The next criteria is whether or not the use is appropriate for its location and is compatible with the general character of the neighboring lands. Here again, as pointed out by staff, we have auto-related uses to the north as well as to the south. We also believe that with the buffering that we're doing, landscaping, the wall, the architectural elements helps to facilitate this particular criteria. Next criteria is that it avoids significant adverse odor, noise, glare, and vibration. Again, no odor is generated by this use. We previously provided you information on the operations of the site, the continued maintenance by our employees, highlighted that the producer for the vacuums is actually enclosed within the concrete building, and the fact that with respect to our blower, which is triggered by a car actually being in that portion, so it doesn't operate the entire time that we're operational, is further mitigated by virtue of the way the building is being constructed, as well as the silencers that are being proposed on that equipment. Lighting will meet code, and then again, our hours of operation are compatible, being 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. The next criteria adequately screens, buffers, and otherwise minimizes adverse visual impacts. Again, I highlight our landscaping plan, the precast wall, the physical enclosures that we're proposing for equipment, as well as to hide the tunnel entrance and exit. The next criteria is that it avoids significant deterioration of water and air resources. I'll just return back to our recycling and the environmentally sustainable aspects of our operation. That we maintain safe and convenient ingress and egress for traffic flow onto and through the site. Again, we've revised the site plan to address not only FDOT's concerns, but also concerns raised by this board in September by eliminating the southernmost exit and providing the additional egress onto Northeast 18th Terrace. Allows for the protection of property values and the ability of neighboring lands to develop. We believe that the redevelopment of the site will only enhance the surrounding area by not only bringing a necessary community amenity to the area, but also including new construction and buffering in addition to the sidewalk along Northeast 18th. I also can't stress enough that the redevelopment of the site, coupled with the total financial investment involved, meaning the land acquisition and the building construction, will significantly increase the taxable value of this property. The next criteria is that it fulfills a demonstrated need for the public convenience. In connection with our application, we also submitted a feasibility analysis report that concluded that there is a significant demand for additional car wash services within the local market, particularly a modern express car wash at this location. And the other two criteria is that it will comply with other relevant city, state, and federal laws. I believe that's a condition of our approval. And then the last just relates to the total area for consideration. So in conclusion, we believe that we have satisfied and shown substantial competent evidence to show why this should be granted by this board for a special exception use. And as such, I respectfully request your favorable consideration. I stand ready to answer any questions as well as the rest of my team, and thank you.
I can't find any of your applications on our files. I see here we have, because you have zip files. We can't download zip files. Scott, we talked about this, and I haven't seen a file relative to this. You said you've submitted, and I have not seen.
The zip files they're available on,
They'll have Macs. We were having trouble with that. I mentioned that. And the commissioner and I both have issues.
yeah, I apologize, they're on they work on almost all computers here.
Not iPads. I can tell you for a fact. But I don't see them even listed here. I see a rehearing request file zip, but I don't show anything where the questions, where the criteria are responded to.
Yeah.
Sir, all I can know is that the items were submitted to the city for this
I
application and consideration.
understand that, Counselor, but if I can't see them, I can't judge them.
Understand. I do have some hard copies if you'd like to see them.
We might have to do that, or we might have to postpone this to another time when we can actually get the files. It's, as I said earlier in my comments, my job is to be sure that everybody gets a full and fair hearing. And if we can't make decisions if we don't have the information that you say has been delivered to us.
I understand.
And I was just surprised about that. No, we should have, it didn't come to us. I had spoken to Scott a few months ago saying we're having trouble with zip files, and we have zip files. We can't see it.
Did they work on your computer, these computers?
This is a Windows computer, to be honest with you. I don't even know how to use it.
Yeah, I don't either, but it's all on this one.
I mean, I can look at it, or I can look at the hard copy. I just want to make a point that I have not had an opportunity to review that.
Well, you're right. The backup is in zip files, but the updated site plan and the staff report are
Right, I could read your staff report,
Yeah.
and I could read the site plan.
yeah.
I just assumed there was no additional submission.
Yeah, there's basically I separated it into the initial submittal back when the application was denied. All of those files are in one, and then the rehearing request, which had the supplemental information. And so those are two different zip files which contain that information.
Because the market feasibility study would have been included in the initial submittal, plus the narrative and everything else. And
Right, and I was not here for your rehearing request.
and we did have a traffic impact statement and a queuing analysis in the
I'm sure you
original
have
as well,
some
and
of
then
it
we
somewhere,
updated. No, I
have not,
Yeah.
if you have evidence you want to submit for this board to consider, I need it in a format that the board can consider it.
Well, I take responsibility for that. I didn't realize that.
It's not a matter of responsibility, it's a matter of just want to be sure that we're all seeing and we're all on the same page when it comes to what we're supposed to be looking at. Because the applicant kept referring to something, I kept trying to find it.
Mr. Chair, according to the Secretary for the Board, on your flash drives, which every member has tonight, all of the documentation is available.
That's great.
To review those.
Um,
And Counselor, I believe she's already, I just want to make sure, I think she has submitted in the record all of the documentation that has been previously presented to for the initial hearing in September, the subsequent rehearing, all of those documents have been submitted. There may have been an error when staff sent that out, I believe it was a week ago, when staff sent out that email. But you do have access to all of that information, I believe, on the flash drives that are.
And I'm not doubting that at all, Counselor. I'm just saying we did not know, Commissioner, neither one of us was able to read this ahead of time. I did not know it existed. I'm just pointing that out. If we want to go ahead and you want to run your case without me reading this stuff, I'm happy to do it. If you want to postpone this, I want to be fair to you. I didn't see your evidence.
Understood. I know we've been able to open the zip drive, but so it sounds like it's some sort of a technological issue, right, with the particular, I guess, platform that you're running. So, I mean, obviously we want you all to have all the information because we want you to make a measured and thoughtful decision on this. This item has been postponed a few times. Hopefully the next time if we do come, if it's the same people, I could really run through my presentation. So I don't take up too much more of your time.
Mr. Chairman,
Personally, I'd prefer to do that. I'd just like to see, if you have more information that you feel is relevant to your case, and I'm going to put it up to you. If you'd like to request a postponement to next month, and I'm sure, Scott, we will work together to be sure we'll have the information.
Well, I can take out, the reason I did the zip files was because there are, they tend to be
Numerous
numerous,
files.
and it tends to get, and that's how other boards operate under zip, using only zip files, the Planning and Zoning Board.
Scott, actually, I mean, I reread the first hearing, the rehearing, and everything, so, I mean, I had it all, but what came in is, if there was a zip file, it wouldn't open for me either. I didn't even know that it came through, really, did you?
I'm not sure which one we're talking about, Scott. Let them figure out what they want to do, and then we'll figure out what we have to do. Counselor?
I mean, I mean, we can certainly share with you the documents on the screen. I guess I just don't know, because I know obviously you probably like to read everything, all of you, from front to back. So they are fairly voluminous. The traffic impact statement's fairly brief, but our queuing study and our feasibility study are easily over 30 pages. So, you know, again, I want to make sure we get a good result, and that it's a result where you all have the information that you need. So it's sounding like for at least 2 of the members on this board that you all don't feel like you have the information that you need to really deliberate on the matter, is what I'm hearing. Correct?
I believe, I will speak for myself, and I don't have your evidence, okay? If you want me to have your evidence,
I understand.
we're going to have to do it another time, because we don't have the time today at this meeting to read 60 pages of technical data, as much as I'd like to.
Understood.
I think,
So I
do you wanna
just
do?
think moving forward, I'd want to make sure that, so I'm guessing with staff, probably the better thing to do is instead of having 2 zip files, which is what we have right now, because I know Paula was able to open it up going into the agenda and clicked on the zip files, pull out that information so we'd have individual documents for you, so hopefully we avoid this issue at the next hearing.
that's what we always get. We've always gotten individual documents. And they've
We
never-
have, but this I
Scott,
tried.
we can worry about that. That's a detail we can worry about.
All right. It was done intentionally to not confuse the board with, this was the original submission, here's the new evidence, and so, but I guess it doesn't
all
work
good
on
intention.
I don't know.
All right, Counselor, what do you want to do? Let's figure it out.
Well, I understand, I mean, I guess.
Want to postpone until next month?
If I may ask a question, Ms. Burry, do you feel you have enough information, or because I know
You
you're
asking
the
me?
other person?
Yes, I have enough information.
You do feel like you have it, because and I apologize, I don't mean to question the board, but do all of you, did the other members have any information? I believe Ms. Cutt said that she was fine, she had all of the documentary information.
Counselor, it's your call. What do you want to do?
Honestly, Mr. Chair, we want you to be able, because you're obviously an integral part of this board, so I think we prefer to continue if that's the board preference, and so we can make sure that everyone that's up there considering has the information to be able to deliberate.
Okay. Do I have a motion to postpone P&Z 23-17-0007 to the meeting of February 15th at 6 p.m.?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll see you next month. Sorry for the inconvenience, and we will figure this out, and we will be in a better position.
Scott, is it possible that you could just put it into folders instead of zips? I don't know how the software works, but if you have folders for it instead of zip files, it might make it easier for the chair and
Yes, but
Commissioner.
I don't know if he'll be able to open it if,
Scott, you and I will work together on this. and
Okay.
We'll figure it out. It must be, I suspect it's something,
it's an Apple software issue. Apple
It's an
doesn't have access to zip files.
I'm sorry?
Apple can't open zip files.
Can or
That's-
cannot?
Cannot,
Right.
cannot.
And it's become an issue, and especially on the iPad.
Yeah.
It will open them, but then they download
In
them.
iOS, you can't open it.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
know that.
okay. The city clerk's office prefers zip files for, and I haven't been doing it for this board because usually there's only a few documents, but for a full site plan that goes to planning and zoning board, it's always in zip format, and that's because, there's extensive list of drawings and documents, and so that's the preferred methodology, but I haven't been doing it for the board because there's usually only a few drawings and documents. Now that I know that you have apples and you can't open a zip file, then,
I know this doesn't work because I tried to look at it on my iPhone at first, and I couldn't. So I actually went and used my Windows PC at home to read it.
Thank you. All right, we are ready for the, does anybody want to take a break while we're stopped? Or keep going?
Let's rock and roll.
All right, let's keep going. Item number 2, special exception, family community residence, Augustine Croco, and that's P&Z 23-17-000010. And I just want to point out to the board, this process for a family community residence does operate with a different set of rules and regulations, and I know Scott's going to go through that for us, but just keep that in mind. Sir.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Jeffrey Lynn, the law firm of Beagley, Myrick, Udell, Lynn, and Zeichman.
I'm sorry, your last name is?
Lynn, L-Y-N-N-E.
I'm going to ask that you speak up as well because I can barely hear.
Is this okay? Is it better?
That's much better now.
Okay, sometimes when you speak too close to a microphone, you get reverb and everyone's hair catches on fire, like mine. So, again, good evening. My name is Jeffrey Lynn, L-Y-N-N-E. I am a native. And
I'm sorry, Mr. Lynn?
Yes.
Now, let's go back. I need your name of your firm, your address, and you can tell me if you've been sworn in.
I have been sworn in. The firm is Beagley, Myrick, Udell, Lynn, and Zeichman. We have 4 offices in Florida.
Wherever you are.
Well, our first office happens to be Mr. Myrick, if you know the Myrick farm, the Pompano Farmers Market, named after my law partner's father. So we've been in this area for many, many years. My office is in the Boca Raton office, 2385 Northwest Executive Center Drive, Suite 250.
Perfect. Thank you.
We're in Florida. And
Mr.
I have
Reale.
sworn in.
thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening again, members of the board and the public here. This is P&Z case number 23-17000010 with the project location is 1302 Northeast 4th Street. The applicant landowner is requesting special exception approval as required by section 155-4202 I-3, which are the family community residence standards of the city's zoning code, in order to utilize the subject property, which is zoned RD1, for a family community residence located less than 660 linear feet from an existing family community residence, rather than separated by at least 660 linear feet as required by code. The property is located on the south side of Northeast 4th Street between Northeast 13th Avenue and Northeast 14th Avenue in the Ocean Way Park subdivision. The subject property has no open building permits and no active business tax receipts. The subject property has an active code case, which is case number 23-09002815 for operating a residential rental property without a business tax receipt. We have with us tonight Mario Sotolongo, who can speak more about that if you have any questions. The subject property contains a duplex. One unit has 2 bedrooms, and the other unit has 3 bedrooms. The applicant is proposing a family community residence at this location. Ordinance number 2018-60, which was adopted on June 12, 2018, codified Pompano Beach land use regulations to give prospective operators of community residences for people with disabilities and recovery communities clarity and certainty on where such uses may locate as of right via special exception. Community residences and recovery communities are subject to distance requirements from other similar uses so as to avoid clustering and altering the character of the neighborhood. A group home that does not comply with a minimum distance separation may be permitted in single-family and two-family, which is the duplex neighborhood. However, they must seek approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals by way of special exception in order to operate. Pompano Beach requires that applicants of such facilities must obtain special exception when they are located within 660 linear feet from an existing community residence housing 4 or more individuals or recovery community as measured from the nearest property line of the proposed community residence to the nearest property line of the existing community residence or recovery community. Staff has determined there is a 507 foot linear distance, which is the way the crow flies, between the subject property and a lawfully existing community residence located nearby at 1413 Northeast 12th Avenue, about a block and a half away. The applicant has submitted proof they are FAR certified recovery residents. That's Florida Association of Recovery Residences. I'd like to point out that within your backup, this document titled Pompano Beach, Florida, Principles to Guide Zoning for Community Residences for People with Disabilities by Daniel Lauber, AICP, and dated June 8, 2018. It's included in the backup of this agenda item. Mr. Lauber is a well-respected planning and law expert on zoning for community residences since 1974 and has written model zoning guidelines for community residences on behalf of the American Planning Association and American Bar Association. The study was approved and accepted by City Commission via Resolution 2018-99, which was later revised to its current version and adopted and accepted by Resolution 2018-178, and was the impetus for the framework for the aforementioned ordinance that codified community residence regulations in Pompano Beach. And following are a few of the pertinent findings in the study, particularly as they relate to separation between similar facilities. The study says that when community residences are allowed as permitted use, it is most reasonable to imposing a spacing distance between community residences that helps them about a block apart in terms of actual walking distance, generally 660 feet. That is 660 feet is the length of the typical American block. The study goes on to say that proposals to locate another community residence so close to an existing one warrant a case-by-case consideration. If the operator of a proposed community residence wishes to locate it within the spacing distance, then the heightened security of a special use permit is warranted. In this case, a special exception. Generally speaking, the existing social structure of a neighborhood can accommodate no more than 1 or 2 community residences on a single block face. The research strongly suggests there is legitimate government interest to assure that community residences do not cluster. Although 2 community residences separated by at least several other houses on a block produce no negative impacts, there is very credible concern that community residences located more closely together on the same block or more than 2 on a block can generate adverse impacts. Interaction with neighbors without severe disabilities is an essential component to community residences, and one of the reasons planners and the courts long ago recognized the need for them to be located in residential neighborhoods. Their neighbors serve as role models, which helps them foster for the normalization and community integration at the core of community residences. As the courts have consistently concluded, community residences foster the same family values that even the most restrictive residential zoning districts promote. Family community residences comply with the purpose statement for each of the Pompano Beach zoning districts that allows residential uses. As part of their justification and narrative, the applicant has incorporated and referenced many aspects of this study. Additionally, included in the backup of this agenda item is a May 15, 2018 memorandum from Daniel Lauber titled Tips for Evaluating Special Exception Applications for Community Residences and Recovery Communities Located Within the Spacing Distance. The definition of a family community residence states the intent is for residents to live in a family community residence on a long-term basis, typically a year or longer. Conversely, a transitional community residence is a residence that provides temporary living arrangement for 4 to 10 unrelated people with disabilities with a limit on the length of tenancy less than a year. that is measured in weeks or months as determined in practice by the rules, character, or other governing document of the community residence. A community residence for people engaged in detoxification is an example of a very short-term transitional community residence. Again, the applicant is seeking a special exception for a family community residence. So the expectation and requirement involves long-term tenancy of its residents, and the applicant's narrative affirms this intent. Moreover, the applicant's narrative states there will be no treatment or clinical services in any form at the property, and it will be used exclusively as a recovery residence. The subject property is zoned two-family residence, which is RD1. That's established and intended to accommodate primarily single-family dwellings and two-family dwellings, including family community residences at moderate densities. The district also accommodates accessory dwelling units, transitional community residences, recovery communities, as well as limited non-residential uses found in urban single-family neighborhoods, such as parks, places of worship, golf courses, and generally approved via special exception. Staff finds the proposed community residence use appropriate and compatible with the neighborhood. If the code allowed distance separation between such facilities to be measured using actual streets and sidewalks rather than the way the crow flies, a special exception would not even be required in this case. Also, this is very important, unlike most other applications that are heard by the ZBA, a special exception for a community residence requires only a simple majority vote rather than a supermajority vote. Moreover, there are only two review standards to consider when a community residence seeks special exception approval because of the separation requirement. Those standards are included in this report, and the applicant has addressed each of these in their narrative. I'd like to just read them quickly because they are kind of important. When a proposed community residence arrangement is required to obtain a special exception because it would be located within 660 linear feet of an existing community residence or recovery community, here's the first standard. The applicant demonstrates that the proposed community residence will not interfere with the normalization and community integration of the residents of any existing community residence or recovery community, and the presence of other community residences or recovery communities will not interfere with the normalization and community integration of the residents of the proposed community residence. The second standard, the applicant demonstrates that the proposed community residence is in combination with any existing community residences and/or recovery communities will not alter the residential character of the surrounding neighborhood by creating an institutional atmosphere or by creating or intensifying an institutional atmosphere or de facto social service district by concentrating or clustering community residences or recovery communities on the block face in a neighborhood. Those are the special exception review standards for a community residence. Should the board determine that the applicant has provided competent, substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy those two special exception review standards for a community residence, staff requests the board include the following 5 conditions in the order. 1, obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, including an approved community residence certificate and a BTR for a rental property. 2, maintain FAR certification. 3, changes or alterations to the composition of the resident population and/or lease agreements for a term of less than 1 year would require a new special exception approval. 4, the approval is strictly limited to family community residence, and changes to the operation of a transitional community residence would require special exception approval. And the last recommended staff condition, substantial conformance to all applicable zoning code standards. That concludes my very long-winded staff report, and I'm available for any questions.
Scott, can you start again where you said this is the staff report?
If you want it, I'll read it again.
Counselor, you ready? Tell us why you're here.
Did you get all of that?
We took notes, copious.
Candidly, I'm going to walk you through it, and I really hope that by the end of my presentation, you really feel very comfortable approving this. I really do. Before I begin, I don't know, just a little housekeeping. I was negligent. I did not timely get a letter, which came this evening, from the Florida Association of Recovery Residences to the city, to the Mr. Chair and the board, asking your approval. They support this application. This is one of their longest standing voluntary certified entities in the state. So they've written that letter to you asking that you support this application this evening. I don't know, Scott, if you would email it to them or if we should read it into the record at the end.
Yeah, go ahead and read it in the record, because I've
Do
not
you
seen it.
want to do it? Can I wait?
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I just got it too. It's not in a zip file, though.
That's good. We got a shot.
Scott, do I just hit the keyboard here just to keep going? Again, Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you very much for having me here this evening. I represent the property owner, who also happens to be an owner of one of the most reputable treatment programs in the city, which is First Step Behavioral Health. They own multiple certified recovery residences. They have a treatment program that is in your commercial districts. I have the CEO and the owners here today. The goal of this home is to provide a family-style community residence for veterans. Mostly these days, the veterans that we're seeing are mostly post 9/11, post Gulf War veterans that have served really anywhere: Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq. That's the most of the people we're seeing these days that are coming to First Step needing help, because candidly the Veterans Administration is not really giving it to them. So they get independent help, and First Step's really investing a lot of time and money into supporting our veterans. So I want to again thank you this evening. Bless you. The requested use of the property again is a community residence. It's going to be what's FAR, the Florida Association of Recovery Residences, who is the state entity that was delegated by the state for oversight and management of recovery residences. They have 4 levels of housing: 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is mostly for people who are actively in treatment. A level 1 and a level 2 are for people who have long established recovery and choose to continue to live with others. Basically, the family they choose for themselves. These are people that otherwise are single, don't have loved ones they can live with, and to maintain their sobriety long term, they choose to live with other people that share the same fellowship and desire to maintain that lifestyle in a drug and alcohol-free environment and in a very safe neighborhood. This is a family-style recovery residence, so it's permitted in this zoning district. The residents can stay as long as they like. They're not tied to any treatment program. The recommended stay is a year, but if they choose to stay as long as they pay rent and follow the house rules, they're allowed to stay. Again, the residents choose to live together as a family. You might have heard there's a cliche, friends are the family you choose for yourself. That's absolutely true. I don't know if anyone here is in recovery or has a loved one in treatment or addiction, but certainly we say the opposite of addiction is community. Community is what heals addiction in our communities, and therefore the sober home is the family unit. The family unit heals addiction, and that's science. So as Scott alluded to, there's a very specific provision of your zoning code that addresses this, and that's because we're addressing federal laws, the Fair Housing Act and the American with Disabilities Act. And so Dan Lauer was very cautious in crafting these ordinances to make sure that there was no discrimination, unintentionally or otherwise, imposing the inability of people who need safe, sober living from doing so. First, as Scott mentioned, there has to be proof of an appropriate license or certification for sober living recovery residences. It's FAR, and they are FAR certified. The second has to be the correct type of residence, either long-term stay, which is family, or it's not transient. That's the transitional. This is not transient. This is family. There's a spacing requirement of 660 feet, and we'll discuss that. It's interesting. The spacing requirement is not to make sure we only have a few homes in the city. It's intended to make sure that those in recovery are surrounded by able-bodied people that are not in recovery, so they can emulate their behavior, rather than, as the theory goes, if we had an entire community of people in recovery, they would only act like each other. I differ on that opinion from Mr. Lauber, but that is your zoning code. So we have the appropriate certification, we have the correct type of residence, we just have to address the spacing requirement, because as the city's map showed, rather than being 660 feet, they're about 507 feet away from each other as the crow flies. So we are allowed to seek special use approval to meet this additional requirement. And by the way, if at any time you have a question on any slide, please let me know. So here's the general area. You can see the two houses. The house that is on the left of the screen, it's existing. Towards the right is the applicant house. This is about 507 feet from each other. The city's code requires that they be, to be permitted as of right, that they be 660 feet. If they're within that spacing requirement, we are allowed to come before you and to demonstrate that we meet the standards that apply, to ask that you please reduce that distance from 660 feet to 507. So what are those standards? I know Scott read them to you. Let me walk you through them a little bit. I've worked a lot with Dan Lauber in many cities. We are working together on a statewide zoning code together. I'm on the statewide task force that drafts the legislation that reined in rogue sober homes. I'm outside counsel to FAR, the Florida Association of Recovery Residences. They rely on me to work with them, the state attorney's offices and others, to make sure that our loved ones and the residents who come to your city are not victimized and they're treated well. Every single home that has been owned and operated by First Step has been FAR certified and has been well run. They have a phenomenal education, which is why FAR felt comfortable supporting their application this evening. So let's talk about those standards really quick. I know they're kind of complicated. There's two prongs, as I call them. You know, the first one is the normalization and community integration prong. And as Scott said, you have these words, and I'll tell you what these mean, but you have concepts of a proposed community residence and an existing community residence. And they just want to make sure, your code, that these two homes don't interfere with each other in their ability for integration and for normalization. Well, what does that even mean? What do those words mean? We'll get to that, I promise you. There's a second prong, there's two prongs, the clustering prong or the anti-clustering prong, where again, it talks about the proposed community residence in combination with any other. They don't want it to alter the residential character of the neighborhood, and they don't want to create this cluster, this concentration on a block face. So a concentration or a cluster is not simply more like you know it when you see it. There are standards to determine when there is a cluster. It's presumed to be a cluster if it's within 660 feet, but the standards that are here so that you can analyze it on a case-by-case basis to determine if that's true or not. So again, how do we judge and determine? I'll show you that in a second as well. So again, as Scott said, the city hired Dan Lauber in 2018. He drafted a code which became community housing regulations, and this is the code you have. You have this in your backup. I'm sure you read all 58 pages and highlighted it and tabbed it, and you know it perfectly well because this is what we're relying upon tonight. But knowing that you didn't do that, what I actually did is I took out, because I cite to Mr. Lauber throughout my report, so every time I cite to him, I highlighted it for you. So you can see exactly what I'm talking about and what Mr. Lauber says. So you don't have to listen to me. We're going to listen to Mr. Lauber tonight and see what Mr. Lauber says about this application, Scott. There's 1 to 9, so if you really wanted to hand one out to everyone, you can. Dan Lauber is the city's outside expert. And I'm going to walk you through that, those highlighting, so that you can certainly, when I cite to Mr. Lauber's study on my slide, I want you to know I'm not making it up. That's actually in his determination. Okay, I'll continue for a function of time. Again, this study was incorporated into your code of ordinances, so it is deemed part of the laws of the city of Pompano Beach. So everything you need to know to analyze this application tonight is in here. And we're going to walk through that right now. Okay, so number one, the normalization and integration prong. We talked about this. What does this mean? Well, again, the concept is to have people with disabilities be able to be surrounded by, as it says in the study, able-bodied people for normalization and integration into the surrounding community. Now, we're dealing with a civil rights law, we're dealing with the Fair Housing Act, and we're dealing with the American with Disabilities Act. So you kind of ask yourself, so you're saying that we have to segregate people so that they can integrate into a community, because if they talk to one another, that's not good for them. And there's really no science to back that up, but I'm not here, I'm just putting that on the record, just so when you try to look to me to explain that to you, all I can do is point to Mr. Lauber, because I didn't write it. So we're going to rely upon what Mr. Lauber said and the boards have approved. Again, the idea of a clustering is Mr. Lauber is concerned that it impedes this normalization and integration, so we have to avoid that in order to get a home like this approved where it's located. So this is a drawing that's directly, a graphic directly from Mr. Lauber's study. The City Commission saw this, I'm sure PZB saw this, everyone, staff saw this, and this is his concept, is if you take streets and you look at a block face, Mr. Lauber is saying that if you have 2 community residences, one, but if you have 2 on a single block face, and those homes are 660 feet from each other, that's a permitted use all day long It's fine. And Mr. Lauber, on page 17, which I've highlighted for you, says that existing social structure of a neighborhood can accommodate 1 or 2 community residences on a single block face. So keep that in mind as we go forward, that Mr. Lauber is saying you can have at least 2 residences on a single block face, and that in of itself is not a de facto cluster. So again, if we look at the residences we're talking about, you'll notice they are not on the same block face. They are separated by multiple blocks and over 9 other lots from each other. So therefore, as a matter of fact and law, evidence, Mr. Lauber's voice himself, this residence cannot impact the normalization and community integration of the proposed residence and the existing. They don't interact with each other. If the fear is that the residence of one is going to interact with the residence of the other, and that somehow is something to be avoided, it's just basically doesn't pass common sense that home number 1 is going to find the other home somehow magically and walk over there, and they're going to start just integrating only with each other. It's just not reasonable. And Mr. Lauber has said as much. It's not reasonable to think that, and therefore this is not a cluster, even though we're between the spacing. But so then how do we measure the spacing? Mr. Lauber says in his own study, the idea is to measure the actual distance that people would actually walk. If we're trying to separate people, Mr. Chair, we want to make sure that how far am I actually going to walk to you as opposed to as the crow flies. So we measured that. And that came out with a measuring wheel to 660.5 feet. The spacing requirement is 660 feet. So if you measure it in actuality, we're good to go. The reason, and the only reason why you measure it as the crow flies, we call it GIS systems, is because it otherwise would be practically impossible for the city to go out there and measure each and every one. Now, do I, as a civil rights fair housing advocate, think you should do that? Absolutely. I think that's your burden to prove to me, but we get it, we understand it. It's much easier for Scott to tell me, hey, Scott, is there another home within this diameter? So it's easier for the city to view top down whether 2 homes are within that spacing distance, but even Mr. Lauber says that's really not how you should measure it.
Can I ask a question here?
Absolutely.
So 660.5 feet,
Yes.
that doesn't take into consideration someone cutting across the lawn or walking, cutting a corner. Half a foot in this instance seems to me very close still.
No, look, Mr. Daly?
Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Daly, for that question. Absolutely, I agree. We're just following what Mr. Lauber said, as you follow the pedestrian right-of-way, as you follow the sidewalks and streets, how the cities are designed for people to walk. They're not designed for people to cut through yards and trespass. So for purposes of prong number 1, we feel very confident that based upon Mr. Lauber's own words and comments about how these houses are spaced, that this criteria has been met. The second criteria is the clustering, and again, it talks about altering residential character of neighborhoods or creating a cluster on a block face. So again, Mr. Lauber states that the reason this is a problem is the clustering may create a de facto social service district. He doesn't define what that means. I don't know what that means. It's an undefined term. I really hope it's not a code word for ghetto. I don't think it is, but we don't know what that means, but apparently it's something to be avoided. So again, looking back at the study, Mr. Lauber would conclude that there are no reasonable clustering because, as he states on page 15, all evidence recorded to date shows that 1 or 2 non-adjacent community residences for people with disabilities on a block does not alter the residential character of a neighborhood. Full stop. Mic drop. That's it. 2 houses that are not adjacent, they're not on block face, certified, doesn't alter the residential character. That's your law. And I agree with it. It also states the research on the impact of community residence makes it abundantly clear that 2 community residences separated by at least several other houses on a block produces no negative impacts. So again, we look more at what Mr. Lauber has to say about this. He says over 50, and I've highlighted this in the record for you, over 50 statistically valid studies have found that certified recovery, recovery residences, community residences, group homes, not clustered on a block face, do not generate adverse impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. That's a finding of fact and conclusion of law by Mr. Lauber, the city's expert. They do not affect property values, nor the ability to sell even the houses adjacent to them. They do not affect neighborhood character. This is the most important because this is the standard. Mr. Lauber says they do not affect neighborhood character as long as they are certified and not clustered on a single block face, which they're not. They certainly do not create excessive demand on public utilities, sewers, water supply, street, parking, any more than any other family would. And they do not produce any more noise than a conventional family of the same size. In fact, what Mr. Lauber concludes is all told, licensed, unclustered group homes, recovery communities, and small halfway houses have consistently found to be as good a neighbor as biological families. Again, this is your expert saying this. So I think with this standard, second prong, I think we've met this too. So if we look at what we have to prove on these two standards, I would argue with you, please, I would assert that there's competent substantial evidence in the record that we've introduced to meet both of these standards, and that the law clearly states that if you meet these standards, that the request is to be approved to be consistent with the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. So again, we have FAR certification, we meet that standard. It's a family community residence, which is permitted in the zoning district, and we ask that you also approve the reduced spacing requirement from 660 feet as the crow flies to 507 feet, knowing that the reality is 660 feet plus or minus, taking into consideration people cutting through yards, and why that would ever happen, I don't know. But be that what it may, that is my presentation. I try to keep it short and sweet so that you have the information you need. I am certainly available for any questions you have, as well as the owners. I just want to, because you don't have it, I do want to read the FAR letter into the record and ask that it be made part of the record, Scott, when it's emailed to you. To the city of Pompano Beach, slower. There we go. I told her my former days as a trial attorney. The judge would always scold me. To the Pompano Beach Zoning Board of Appeals, dear Mr. Chairman and members. This was signed by Micah Robbins, by the way, the CEO of the Florida Association of Recovery Residents. Micah Robbins, M-I-C-A-H Robbins, with 2 B's. We understand that first step, behavioral health, a FAR certified recovery residence provider, is before you this evening, seeking accommodation from the spacing distance imposed between community residences under the city zoning code. We write in support of this application and look forward to having another FAR certified recovery residence in the city of Pompano Beach. The Florida Association of Recovery Residences, or FAR, is the state-appointed entity pursuant to section 397.487 Florida statutes, responsible for the certification and oversight of the state's recovery residences. FAR certified recovery residences serve an important role in our communities by providing supportive, drug and alcohol-free family living environments to persons in recovery from substance use disorders. Mr. Jeffrey Lynn serves as special outside counsel to FAR regarding zoning matters specifically relating to recovery residences throughout the state of Florida. We ask that all due consideration and accommodation be provided to the applicant and to their request so that more FAR certified recovery residences are welcomed into your city. Sincerely, Micah Robbins. I ask that letter, which Scott received this afternoon, be made part of the record. And with that, we conclude our presentation and are available for any questions.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions? Okay. Counselor?
Mr. Chair, just for purposes of the record, I know that Mr. Lauber's name was mentioned initially, but it seemed like there was some sort of association between the council here tonight and Mr. Lauber, and I just wanted, for the purpose of the record, if he'd make it clear if Mr. Lauber was associated with his firm or...
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yes, there's no purely professional colleagues rowing in the same direction.
Meaning he is not a part of your firm?
No.
He was not consulted as an expert for the presentation here tonight?
No.
Okay, thank you.
You just had your oars in the water at the same time.
So, yes.
You had the oars, you said rowing in the same direction. The
Yeah.
oars were in the water.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support? Please come on down here, if you both would, and the first one of you that reaches this podium gets to speak first. I'll ask you to come to the center podium.
Mr. Chairman, I'll have to swear in the last 2 people that came in.
Okay.
If you both raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you. One of you, please come to the center podium. Whoever gets here first gets to talk first. I'll need your name, spell your last name, your address, and you need to tell me verbally if you've been sworn in.
My name is Ada Arlene Delgado, Delgado. I'm a resident at 1217 Northeast 4th Street, Pompano Beach, Florida, and I have been sworn in.
Thank you. Please tell us what you'd like to tell us.
Good evening. We purchased this residence 8 years ago. The residence actually that is in question right now is right across of a high school and a middle school, and nobody's even mentioned that part. I'm very concerned about ourselves and our community, our high school. We have a magnet school right across, and you know, nobody's taking consideration that. When we purchased the home, we were told that we were not able to rent for less than 6 months. No Airbnb, no, there was a whole bunch of clauses. We signed them, we agreed upon them because that's what the city was requiring. The other thing is that other facility is within walking distance of a block. They've had issues already. I know that they've had, we just had the other day, this past week, we had somebody shot on our street. So who tells us that this is not going to be, and we talk about value of the home, it is affected. As residents, I wouldn't purchase a home that's across from a Safeway house. There was no way. When I purchased that home, it's Old Pompano Beach. It's a residence. It's a community. We're putting all these businesses, all these apartments. We can't even walk after 7 o'clock at night. We have bums in the park, and whatever, you know, we can't even walk with children, our grandchildren, nothing. So it's a big concern. So that's where, you know, I'm concerned about our high schools, our middle schools. It's right across from there. It's across from my home as well. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for participating.
Thank
And Martha, let's put her down as an opposition, obviously.
Okay.
Sir?
Good evening,
Good evening.
everybody. My name is Carlos Rivera, R-I-V-E-R-A. I reside on 1217 Northeast 4th Street, Unit B. My wife just was at the podium.
Have you been sworn in?
Yes, I've been sworn in.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, the reason why we're here, like my wife mentioned, you know, everybody failed to mention, you know, they mentioned Mr. Lover's findings and studies, but nobody has mentioned the schools that are right across from this property, the proposed property, that's gonna be housing people that have the right to live in a community, but at the same time, there's always issues that are gonna arise. Just this past week, like my wife mentioned, there was a dispute in between roommates, and one of them got shot and killed. And it's right adjacent, you know, to this 1302 proposed by Mr. Line. Another situation, I lived prior to this resident, I was living on the island, Hibiscus and 4th, on the east side of Pompano. And I witnessed, you know, what the safe houses bring, which is the police constantly, you know, having to interfere, you know, in between roommates, all the discussions. There's always the overdose, there's the coronel, all these things that nobody has mentioned that occur when we have a safe house. And sadly enough, we don't have all the neighbors we spoke to, and they're very concerned. They have kids, they have their businesses, they live in the community, been there for the past 10 years. They were not able to be here because they have responsibilities, you know, they have little kids. So they could not be here, but they're very concerned. They have the same, you know, we were able to speak to them. And everybody understand we do have right across from our property a gentleman that's been living there for 20 years that is still in recovery from alcohol and drugs, and is an excellent neighbor, but the proposed residence is not, it can be called family. They're gonna be, you know, interacting as a family members, but they are not. In reality, they're not family. And they're gonna be bringing all kinds of issues that are going, you know, it's gonna be disputes. Like there's some families, you know, families all have disputes, but these people are not related. And there's gonna be arguments, there's gonna be all different types of problems that are going to come up. And we're very concerned about it. I don't know. Again, I want to mention that this property is right across the street from the parking of our beautiful high school, Pompano Beach High School, which is a magnet A+ school, and it's got the elementary on the other side. Kids go across this street, you know, across 4th and 13th, every day going to school and coming back from school. I don't think there's a need to have another safe house or any other of these properties in the neighborhood. With that, you know, I would like to close, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you for participating. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support? Okay, hearing in support? Yeah. Come on up.
He's an owner. It's fine. I'm his lawyer, so he doesn't need to speak.
Okay.
I spoke for him.
You spoke. Anyone wishing to, so hearing none or no more, does anyone here wish to speak in opposition? We've had two. Anybody else? Okay, public hearing is closed.
So, Mr. Chairman, if
I'm sorry, the public hearing is not closed, excuse me. Just before we do that.
Do I have a chance to cross-examine the witnesses?
Oh, sure, of course.
That's why I asked some questions just to clarify something.
Sure.
Ms. Delgado or Mr. Rivera, either one of you can come up.
Could you please come up to the podium?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I understand, I'll make a statement so my question makes sense. I understand everything that you're saying. I think what's unfortunate is that the concerns that you have, while very legitimate, are not realized. They're preconceived notions, they're stigma, they're prejudice, because we only have in our minds that this is what people in recovery are like. That's just not true. And to ensure that this is a family environment, that's why the state of Florida requires it be FAR certified, which is an irrebuttable presumption that this will be living as a family. This isn't a dorm, it's not a boarding house, it's not a group home. It's its own unique form of sober living that's existed for decades and decades and decades. And cities have forced them out because residents, understandably, talk about kids, and they talk about crime, and they talk about drugs, and rather than acknowledging, actually, you can sit down. I don't have a question. If I have a question, I'll come. But rather than acknowledging,
Is this cross-examination at this point?
it does.
though,
I
if you
have
don't
a question. Well, I have a question, I guess, because I saw Mr.
I'm just wondering if this is cross-examination or if he's
I have a question. I do. Do you, Ms. Delgado, have you been to the residence before? Have you met the residents who live there?
Have I met the residents that live?
Your neighbors. You said these are your neighbors, so have you gone over and met them?
No, I have not met them.
Okay. And you also talked about, and your husband did as well, concerns about drug use and other things at the home. What makes you feel that?
They're not even following, and this is,
So the question is, what makes you think they're going to be doing drugs in a drug-free and alcohol?
I can't,
You don't know.
Counselor, I think you've made your point.
Also, just so I'm clear, it's across the street from a school, so but it's a safe neighborhood. Would you agree it's otherwise except for this unusual shooting, is it otherwise a safe neighborhood?
there's been crime.
Crime, but is it otherwise a safe neighborhood? You bought
Right.
there.
Yes,
And there's kids there.
there are kid children.
Okay. And we don't know about the other homes, unless you have personal knowledge, you said, of anyone else doing drugs in their home or doing horrible things with children in their home, doing things illegal. We have no idea what they're doing in their homes, right?
Correct.
Okay. I have no further questions on that.
I'm sorry?
I have no further questions on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the board have any questions? All right, in that case, closing comments.
Thank you. I want to think about it. I noticed Mr. Daly nodding his head when we were talking about being across some schools in this area, and I want to tell you that's exactly why this neighborhood was chosen, because to live in a safe and sober environment, you need to be in a safe neighborhood. You need to be in a neighborhood where there's no crime or little crime, where the neighbors look out for each other, where there are people with children and families to emulate what healthy living looks like. That's the normalization and community integration. If the goal is to simply say, we don't want these people in our neighborhood, have them go somewhere else, besides violating federal law, that's not going to help them. It's going to push them further and deeper, not only into addiction, but to suicide. Okay? And we don't need that. Specifically for our veterans that served our country, and we're trying to give them a home to live in. So I understand very well, I do, Ms. Delgado and Mr. Rivera, your concerns, and I've always said, and the state's always said, that's the distinction between a FAR certified recovery residence and a non-certified recovery residence. One is a home, the other is a flop house. One is a place of healing and recovery, the other one is a den of debauchery and drug abuse. That's not what we have here. No. Okay, my client is insistent, he wants to say something to you if you don't mind. The board's.
My name's Augustine Crocco. I go by Gus. I'm the CEO of First Step.
Mr. Crocco, I need your address, please.
Yeah, it's 502 Misty Oak Drive, Pompano Beach.
Great. And how do you spell your last name?
Crocco.
Have you been sworn in?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, I just want to address the community and the concerns. Absolutely. I've been doing this 20 years at First Step. We're celebrating 20 years this year. When I first came in 20 years ago, I was looking for sober livings, and it was a madhouse down here. It was horrible. People were doing everything and doing a lot of crazy things, and the best thing that's ever happened to our industry is FAR. And I used to try to find places for the people to live, and I don't want to, put anybody down, but I came in here about 15 years ago, and I said, well, I want to find a safe place for my people to stay in recovery, because we keep them for a long time. They don't just come in for 30 days, 60 days. They stay some of them are here for years with us. And you know what they said to me? Well, anything west of Dixie Highway, you can do whatever you want. And he said, anything east of Dixie Highway, you're going to have trouble, and anything near US 1, you ain't going to get in. And I said, well, how can I keep my people safe? He goes, well, we don't care, as long as you put them somewhere where no one bothers them and they don't bother anybody else. So I've been around, not in my neighborhood, for 20 years. And I understand everybody's concerns, I really do. And I feel, a lot of what you're feeling. But we drug test our people. They have curfews. We have people catching up with them all the time. We've expanded our program with veterans, and they get some of the worst treatment in the country. It's very disturbing. I mean, they come into our place and they think it's a palace, and we're trying to put in long-term care for them. And I'm very aware of this. And you need to understand something. The things that you see and hear about us, I'm in recovery myself, so I'm prejudiced. I've been doing this 40 years. It's not when you're trying to stay clean, it's when you go on a run and you're losing it. It's when you become crazy. Most of the time you're in recovery, you're living a program, you're living to a higher standard, or you can't stay clean. You're doing the next right thing over and over and over every day. And that's what we teach. You need to live to a higher standard and become a hero again, especially with the veterans. You were a hero and now you're tragic and now you look like a fool. So we need to get you stepping up again and live the way you want to live and the way you should live. So I am and actually when you said that, Jeff, that's one of the reasons I liked the thing, because it was across from a school. And there's no neighbors on that side, and on the block, it's an open block, so it's not clustered. Because I wouldn't like it either. I don't want 3 sober livings in my neighborhood. I don't. It's got to be spaced out. But they also do need a community. It's really not right, not in our neighborhood. And the more that we research this, and the more that you see this, you'll understand that addiction is a medical condition, okay? It's a neurological, chemical dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system, and I could go in and tell you all about it because I've been studying this 40 years. I do neurology and all that stuff, so we do a lot of work with it. But as long as you're abstinent, you're working on a daily basis to try to get better and live a life again, to recapture your life. So we talk about, the cliche of being reborn again. You get a second chance to live again. Okay, so that's what it's about. But I understand your concerns. But we've been doing this a long time, and we take pride in our people. And we don't put up any shit. If they can't do the right thing, they get out. Okay? Just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crocker. I have nothing further.
All right. Any other questions? All right. The public hearing is now closed. We'll take board discussion. or a motion?
Yeah, I would just like to just say some things to the board, at least. While I appreciate and think that this is phenomenal what they do, and I support in general the recovery of people, this is too close and too within a distance of a second community residence or family residence that I'm comfortable with. And as a resident of the community, I just wanted to share my thoughts and opinions that 507 feet is under the code, and they're coming for a special exception, and I don't feel they produced enough to achieve that special exception, in my opinion. So I'd like to make a motion if no one else has anything to say.
You go ahead and make a motion, we can still discuss it.
In the planning and zoning case 2-4, are we up to 2? Oh, we're up to 2-3 still, okay. 2-3-1-7-0-0-0-0-1-0. I move we find there is competent and substantial evidence in the record that all requirements for granting the special exception have been met, and that we grant the special exception subject to the 5 conditions requested by staff.
Second. Second.
Thank you. We have a motion. It's been made and seconded. Further discussion?
I'd just like to say that a line has to be drawn somewhere for the separation between these types of facilities, and the line was drawn, and I see no reason why we should infringe upon that line.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, this discussion on community homes was done years ago. The gentleman that spoke up here hit on it, on some of the really deplorable places that there were. And the city went through a lot of meetings, a lot of work with the state and the federal government in order to set guidelines in our city so that not only is the community safe, but also those that are recovering in these homes that are safe. And I have to say, they took a long time to come up with 660 feet. And to cut that short, I think we'd be moving backwards. And my feeling is the 660 should stand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Martha, would you please call the roll?
Okay, Richard Daly,
No.
Charlotte Burry,
No.
Penny Cutt,
No.
Nicole Kopkok,
No.
and Linda Thomas,
No.
Dan Yaffe.
No. Denied. Let's take a 10-minute break. are back on the record, and our next, oh boy, here we go. I had the wrong page turned. Item number 3, we're at the end of the agenda, LN 547, a variance request by Kimberly Villela Perez. It's P&Z 23-11000019.
Hello, good evening. My name is Kimberly Villela Perez. V as in Victor, ILLELAPEREZ, and I have been sworn in. My address is 71 Northeast 45 Court, Oakland Park.
I think you're the first person that got them all right. Thank you. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For our final item of the evening, the applicant landowner is requesting a variance from Section 155-5302D2A, which are fences in residential districts of the Pompano Beach Zoning Code, in order to allow a portion of a 6-foot-high privacy fence for a townhouse unit to encroach into an 8 feet into the required front yard, rather than limiting the fence height to 4 feet in the required front yard as required by code. The property is located on the north side of Southwest First Court, between Southwest 3rd Avenue and Southwest 4th Avenue, in the Avondale neighborhood of the Northwest CRA. This is a Building L of the Parkway Gardens, and that obtained a certificate of occupancy back in November 29th, 1979, via Building Permit 791514 for a 2-story, 8-unit apartment building. Although the individual dwelling units are oriented toward an interior courtyard, required setbacks are directed by the site as a whole, meaning that the required front yard is measured from the Southwest First Court lot line. The building is set back 29 feet from the front lot line, and the applicant is proposing a 6-foot privacy fence around their patio area, which would encroach 8 feet into the required 25 feet front yard setback. The proposed 6-foot-high fence would be permitted by right if it were set back 25 feet from the front lot line. However, that would only allow for a 4-foot-wide enclosed patio area. Alternatively, the fence could be located within the required front yard at a height of 4 feet, although that would not provide sufficient privacy for the applicant's patio area. Research suggests other fence permits within this multifamily residential complex have been erroneously approved within the required front yard at a height of 6 feet. So installation of a 6-foot-high stockade wood fence located 17 feet from the front lot line would not appear out of character for this development. Moreover, in addition to the front facade of the building setback, an additional 4 foot beyond code requirements, a swale area with approximate depth of 19 feet separates the front lot line from the Southwest First Court pavement. The Parkway Gardens Condominium Association approved the fence installation request. That's in the backup from a September 8th, 2023 letter, subject to building permit approval. There are 8 variance review standards, and should the board, and the applicant has addressed each of these in their narrative and justification. Should the board determine that the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy those 8 review standards, staff recommends the board include the following condition in the order, and that is to obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals for the fence, including building and zoning compliance permits, and a tree permit for tree protection for the existing tree canopy in the front yard. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you, Scott. A couple of quick questions. You can help us kind of picture this a little bit better. Based on the aerial, in addition to the swale and the setback, how many feet is would the fence be from the street?
So we are talking, so the swale area, let me do my math here, 19 feet separates the front lot line from the pavement, the actual street, and then in addition to that, there is 17 feet from where the proposed fence would be. So
36 feet?
Correct.
I do math.
Yep, thank you. I'm not good at it.
So actually, the fence will be 36 feet from the pavement.
From the pavement of the street.
And how wide is this fence?
It is, the dimensions are 6 feet high. The applicant.
May I answer?
Yes.
12 feet wide by 19 feet long.
And you have an existing 19-foot fence?
It used to be erected here. Because of a hurricane, it got knocked down and they just took away the trash.
So we're talking about a 19-foot fence that is similar to other fences in the community, and it's 36 feet from the road.
That's correct. And if
We're
you,
going 6 or 8 feet high?
they're proposing 6 foot high.
Just
fence.
6?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it's not,
It wouldn't occur to anybody that it might be out of.
de minimis.
Yeah, it's de minimis, and if you do the Google Street View, you'll see the other one doesn't look out of place at all either, the existing one that was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to get to the facts, so please go ahead.
Yes, so it is for a 6-foot fence height. It would match 100% of the other fences as part of the condominium. The board did approve it because it is the status quo. It is the same as everything else they have. The response on the permit was because it's considered the front yard of the building. However, I would like to point out it's just bedroom windows and bathroom windows on that side, and the patio door, which is the access to the patio area. So there is no perceived front entrances. Nobody crosses through there.
It's a side yard.
Yeah, according to the zoning, we have to look at the site as
I
a
understand.
whole, but yes.
But
it is
it's
for-
effectively a
For all
side
intents and
yard
purposes,
of
it's a
that
side
unit.
yard. Yes, correct.
Okay. Anything else?
And there is a lot of foot traffic on that street, vehicular and people walking back and forth. It's a very busy street, so a 6-foot height would really be appreciated for the privacy.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support of the petitioner? You're the only two people here. Anyone else? Hearing none. Anyone wish to speak in
Mr. Chairman, I'd
opposition?
like to make a motion.
Well, wait a second. Any closing comments?
That would be all.
No. Thank you. Public hearing is closed.
In the planning and zoning case 23-11000019, I move we find there is competent and substantial evidence in the record that all requirements for granting the variance have been met, and we grant that this variance is subject to the one conditions by staff.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Call the roll.
Richard Daly,
Yes.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Penny Cutt,
Yes.
Nicole Kopop,
Yes.
Linda Thomas,
Yes.
and Dan Yaffe.
Yes. You're approved. Good luck with your fence.
And get your privacy.
Okay, the last thing on our agenda tonight is we, as always, have to, in January, we elect new officers, a chair and a vice chair. So as I always do, I pass the gavel. We'll do it ceremoniously to you. And Martha will conduct the election of chair.
Okay, do I have a motion for a nomination?
I
I
move Dan
nominate
Yaffe.
Dan Yaffe.
Or any other nominations? Okay, all in favor, say yea.
Aye.
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 Okay, you're appointed.
Thank you all.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to give you back the gavel, and you're going to,
All right, I have the gavel. May I have, I'm not going to hit it. I'm not. Trust me, I won't hit it. I'm not going to touch it again. May I have a nomination for vice chair, please?
I'd like to nominate Charlotte Burry.
Second.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well then, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Our new vice chair. Is there any other business before us tonight?
we'd just like to wish Nicole congratulations on her wedding around the
right.
corner, so congratulations and happy Valentine's Day to everyone.
That's right. You're going to come back next time as Mrs.
Yeah. Get all the paperwork filed in time.
Go up to the zoning department. They do paperwork. They do paperwork real well. All right, folks, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.